New Nintendo consoles are always fascinating, whereas Sony and Microsoft's process seems more iterative, pursuing more powerful hardware with each successive generation. Nintendo seems to start from scratch more often than not. The company consistently thinks about new ways to play. Sometimes that leads to tremendous successes, like the Wii and the DS. Sometimes that results in underwhelming sales, like the GameCube and the Wii U. Ever since the DS in 2004, Nintendo has been following a blue ocean business strategy. Rather than competing head-on with its traditional rivals, Nintendo tried to create new, uncontested markets, attracting consumers not traditionally interested in games. This worked well for the aforementioned Nintendo DS and Wii, which became the two best-selling Nintendo platforms ever, but their successors didn't fare nearly as well. The landscape has changed pretty dramatically since the Wii, and in large part, it's thanks to the prevalence of smartphones and tablets. Now the question is there any blue ocean left for Nintendo? With casual players using smart devices and hardcore gamers demanding more powerful hardware, are they still relevant as a console maker? Nintendo's answer is the Switch. The Switch is a bold concept, combining handheld and home consoles into one unit. The idea is to leverage Nintendo's traditional strengths as a manufacturer of both console and portable systems and allow players to experience the best of both worlds with one unified platform. But does it work? Has Nintendo made the right compromises to achieve this? Does the Switch have what it needs to be successful in the long run? Well, right away it's evident that the Switch is a nicer piece of hardware than the Wii U's cheap, plasticky-feeling gamepad and the reliable but creaky 3DS. The Nintendo Switch retails for $300 US and consists of the tablet-like unit itself, a dock that connects it to the TV, and two multi-purpose Joy-Con controllers that can attach to the tablet or be used wirelessly in multiple configurations. The system has 32 gigabytes of built-in flash memory to store games, save data, screenshots, and other sundry files. That's not much considering how large games can be these days. Most will likely need to purchase a micro SD card to expand the storage at some point. These are widely available and can be found relatively inexpensively. Micro SD cards pop into a slot on the back beneath the unit's kickstand. Physical games are still available for the Switch as well. They come on game cards that are almost as small as micro SD cards. I don't plan on buying many physical copies of games, especially because I'd be afraid to lose the cards, but the option's there if you want it. Aside from the card slots, the other features of the tablet are physical power and volume buttons, a headphone jack, and a single USB Type-C port on the bottom. When you slot the Switch into the dock, it outputs video signal through USB-C and also charges the console. Unfortunately, that means you need a dock to connect the Switch to a TV. You can't just connect an HDMI cable straight to the unit or something. The dock itself is very simple. In the back there's a port for an HDMI out to the TV and a USB-C in for power. There are two standard USB connectors on the front, presumably for charging controllers. I haven't found any other use for them yet. The Switch's screen is the best Nintendo has ever produced. It's leaps and bounds better than all of the company's past portable systems, and far better than the Wii U gamepad. It's a 6.2-inch display at 1280 by 720 resolution, also known as 720p HD. That's lower resolution than most phone screens these days, but what matters is pixel density, or how many pixels there are per inch. At 237 pixels per inch, the Switch's screen is perfectly adequate for playing games. And really, I have zero complaints about the screen at all. Could Nintendo have included a higher resolution screen? Sure, but why? It would drain significantly more power while only making a difference to the pickiest of consumers. This was a smart choice. The screen is also a capacitive or multi-touch touchscreen. That's standard for mobile devices, but a first for Nintendo. No stylus needed here. You can navigate the system UI with touch, which is nice, especially when you want to type something in. The touchscreen is inconsistently used in games. Sometimes you can use it in menus and stuff like that, but there are a few games that completely use the touchscreen. The Switch will support mobile games just as well as any tablet or phone if developers decide to bring them over to the platform. Of course, they'll only work that way in portable mode. You don't have access to the touchscreen, obviously, while it's docked. I think the physical size of the screen is fantastic for individual play, but for multiplayer applications, it's really small. It works well enough for games where players are all on one screen, but split-screen games divide the display into physically tiny chunks. Two-player and split-screen is doable for short periods if you don't have a better option, but it's not a great way to play games with lots of detail. There have been issues raised about screen scratching. The screen is made of plastic rather than glass like most smart devices, so it's much more prone to scratching. I put a screen protector on my Switch almost as soon as I got it out of the box, and I haven't had any scratching issues, at least nothing permanent, and certainly nothing that's bothered me while playing on the device. I recommend a screen protector 100%, it's the smart thing to do. Without getting into the nitty-gritty, the Switch is moderately powerful hardware given its form factor and capabilities as a portable system. It's more powerful than the Wii U, but it doesn't hold a candle to the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, or a PC built for games. When docked, the Switch is capable of resolutions up to 1080p, which is standard HD. In portable mode, games run at the screen's native 720p resolution. New versions of the PS4 and Xbox are both targeting 4K resolutions now. But remember, Nintendo's not trying to compete in that space. Nintendo made a less powerful system in order to achieve portability and relative affordability. For most consumers, there are just a few important takeaways concerning the Switch's system architecture. One is that it's more similar under the hood to other systems. That's good because it can greatly ease the development of games, which means it will be faster, cheaper, and easier to bring games to the Switch than it was to past Nintendo platforms. We're already seeing many indie games on the system, and a few releases that have launched simultaneously on all modern platforms. I could see the Switch becoming my go-to system with indie games. But bigger, more graphically intensive games likely won't come to the system very frequently. And when they do, the Switch version will have the least visual quality. The trade-off is being able to play portably, of course. There can be slight performance differences between handheld and docked modes. The Switch's processor runs a little faster when docked, but the resolution is bumped up on the TV, so that's where the extra power goes. So far, most games seem to run pretty similarly in both modes, and there haven't been any games with wildly different performance or graphical fidelity depending on the mode. For less demanding titles, I wouldn't expect any difference at all. As always, efficient, optimized code is vital, and this will vary from developer to developer and game to game. As more development kits get into the hands of game creators, we should see this stuff get better. It happens with every console. Overall, I'm not too concerned about the Switch's performance. No, it's not top of the line, but it's not meant to be. It's good enough for many types of games, and games on the Switch can go with you anywhere. Of course, when I say you can play anywhere, there's the caveat that you can only play as long as you've got battery power. Nintendo says you'll get between 2.5 and 6.5 hours of life out of a single charge. That's kind of a big range. The wild fluctuation is due to many factors. Like any mobile device, you'll burn less battery if wireless is turned off, if the screen is less bright, or if you're using a less demanding application. That's the biggest factor, what kind of game you're playing. Zelda Breath of the Wild, for example, is a big open-world game, and it's more energy-intensive than, say, Shovel Knight, which is a retro-styled platformer. Obviously, one of these taxes the system a bit more and burns more battery. The Switch charges using USB-C, which is a standard cable becoming more common in new mobile devices. You can buy a pack of cables and plug them into USB wall chargers anywhere. You don't have to buy proprietary chargers for the Switch. In practice, I've had no battery complaints so far, but that's at least partially because I took steps to preemptively address battery life concerns. I picked up a few USB-C cables. I already had USB batteries, they're fairly inexpensive. I usually keep one or more in my bag. If the battery gets dangerously low, I can always plug into one of those. What I'm saying is, the battery life could be better, but it's an easy problem to mitigate. Your lifestyle will determine whether this is an issue for you. I'm an adult. If I'm going to be playing a game for a long time, I'm probably going to be at home and have the Switch in the dock anyway. Or else I might play in bed, but only for an hour or two. As a kid, I played portable games more often, and I think I would have run out of battery a lot. The only time I'm likely to play the Switch portably for long enough periods of time to drain the battery is on trips. I actually did take a trip with the Switch, and because I took USB batteries with me and was on planes with USB power outlets, the battery was never a problem. Nintendo's latest in a long line of weird controller designs is the Joy-Con. Immediately you notice how tiny these things are. The face buttons are small, the same size as on the 3DS actually. I found them to be totally fine. Same with the shoulder and trigger buttons on the top and back. The shorter thumbsticks are a bit limiting, however. They're necessary for portability, and in many types of games, I think they'll be just fine. But when doing things from a first-person perspective, the thumbsticks don't have the precision I want. Certainly tuning the sensitivity to account for the shorter sticks would help, but they're definitely inferior to a traditional controller in this way. As the control method for portable mode, the Joy-Con work great. They slide on easily and snap into place. The connection feels solid, with only a small amount of play. They're certainly the best feeling portable controls I've ever used, much nicer than the 3DS, and all past Nintendo handhelds. To play in docked mode, you can hold both Joy-Con individually, or slide them into a plastic piece called the Joy-Con grip. Inside the grip, the Joy-Con form a traditional controller. This works well enough. I don't typically play this way in docked mode, but I don't think it's necessary at all to invest in the Pro Controller. When you play with the Joy-Con individually, Nintendo wants you to slide on these plastic attachments that extend the shoulder buttons and give you a wrist strap. Okay, fair enough, but the attachments themselves feel kind of awful. It's the only part of the Switch that feels cheap and nasty, besides maybe the kickstand. And I don't particularly like the idea of having to carry around these extra bits of plastic if I want to pull the Joy-Con off the system and play with a friend. When held sideways like this, the ergonomics of the Joy-Con are a bit strange because they're designed to be multifunctional. The thumbstick is very close to the face buttons, which can leave your thumbs feeling a bit cramped. There's also a deactivated trigger and shoulder button on the side that are right where you're likely to rest one of your fingers. It feels weird to be resting on buttons like that. Every other method of control for the Switch is better than playing with a single Joy-Con, but they're still okay. They do the job. I was able to race and platform and puzzle just fine for the most part. Frankly, Nintendo packed a lot of weird extra features into these things. I'd be surprised to see widespread support for things like the infrared camera, motion controls, and HD rumble, which feels more like mobile phone vibration than traditional video game controller rumble. The party game 1-2 Switch uses this feature in a couple of games, but it just seems like a huge gimmick, and I wasn't about to buy 1-2 Switch just to test it for myself. The Switch Pro controller is a perfectly fine, standard, modern console controller. There are only a few differences between it and the PlayStation's DualShock 4 and the Xbox One controller. The Switch Pro controller is motion sensitive. The Xbox controller isn't. And it has an NFC reader for Amiibo support. Neither competing controller has NFC, because they're not trying to sell these plastic figures. The Pro controller lacks features the other two have. Notably, it has digital instead of analog trigger buttons. That's fine for most games, but it is a detriment to driving games, which often make use of analog triggers to simulate gas pedals. The Pro controller also lacks a headphone-microphone port as found on the other controllers. You can use the Switch with headphones, but it'll have to be in portable mode with the headphones plugged directly into the console. These few missing features wouldn't be a big deal. They'd hardly be worth mentioning if the Pro controller wasn't markedly more expensive than the other controllers. The Pro controller costs $70 US, while the other controllers retail for $60, but can easily be found for cheaper than that from reputable sellers. Why is it more expensive? I can imagine several reasons for this, but none of them justify the extra cost to the consumer. And that's a shame because this controller feels really nice. It's the nicest way to play on the Switch. I would love to have 4 nice controllers for Mario Kart and other multiplayer games down the line, but at that price, there's no way I can justify it. The Switch's system interface is a welcome departure from the Wii and Wii U's menus. It's a clean break in terms of design. It's also much faster than those old systems. The best feature by far is the ability to quickly jump in and out of your game and put the system into sleep mode at any time. While this isn't a unique feature, it's a first for a Nintendo home console, and it's essential to the portability of the system. The Switch boots quickly, comes out of sleep mode even faster, and gets you right back into your game. There isn't a whole lot going on with the system right now. It's mostly there to play games, but there are a few built-in apps and system-level features. There's a dedicated screen capture button on the controllers, which will quickly snap a screenshot at any time. It's generally faster than the PS4's screenshot feature, which can lag quite a lot. I've missed a lot of my screenshots on my PlayStation because of this, but the Switch seems to capture pretty much instantly. The drawback is the screenshots on the Switch are only 720p resolution, even while playing on the TV. That's a bit disappointing. A gallery app lets you see the shots you've taken, do some limited editing, and upload them to social media sites. There's a news app, and by news, Nintendo means advertisements. Mostly. Occasionally, I've seen other content pop up in the news section, but mostly it's there to sell you stuff. It doesn't really bother me though, it's not that intrusive, and I actually want to know what's new on the eShop each week. Unfortunately, there are many ways the Switch feels unfinished from a software and ecosystem perspective. Nintendo's online service basically doesn't exist right now. You can play games online, but it's very bare bones in terms of features. A paid online service will be launching in the fall. You're able to friend other users, but not by username. For now, the infamous friend code system is still in place. There are a couple of other ways to friend people, but once you've become friends, there's nothing for you to do other than see what they've been playing. While you can technically play with friends online, that's a game-by-game feature. You can't just go to your friends list and join a friend's game from there, like you can on most other online services. There aren't proper media apps like Netflix or Amazon Prime on the Switch, at least not yet. And there's no web browser either. When you buy a digital game on the Switch, that game purchase is tied to your Nintendo account. However, that doesn't allow you to sign into a friend's Switch with your account and then re-download your games on their device. Even if you could, there are no cloud saves, so none of your save data would come over. So for all intents and purposes, your digital game purchases might as well be tied to your device. Worse, there's no other way to back up your save data either. If you want to transfer your data to another microSD card, sorry, you're out of luck for now. You can copy the files from one card to another on a computer, but the Switch won't recognize or read the new card unless it's formatted on the Switch itself, which wipes all the data you transferred. The system software will no doubt evolve over time. Hopefully this stuff with data management and digital rights will improve, but it's difficult to tell now whether that will be the case. The system software, such as it is at least fast and responsive. It's not feature-rich like the Xbox or the PlayStation, but it also lacks the bloat of those operating systems. Nintendo's system is all about games. For now. When talking about a video game console, the hardware is only part of the story, and it's arguably the least important part. Consoles live and die by the games available for them. In the first couple months of the Switch, we've got a decent but not amazing lineup of games. I'm going to briefly look at a few of them with an aim to tell you more about my experience playing them on the Switch, rather than just straight reviewing them. The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild was the flagship launch title for the Switch. Despite also being released on the Wii U, it's the biggest system seller for the present. Some of the best games ever made were Nintendo launch titles, and although this may be a premature declaration, I think Breath of the Wild stacks up well against those venerated classics. It's the best 3D game in the series, and a stunning reinvention of a franchise that had become too stale and familiar. Zelda is an impressive showcase for portable gaming on the Switch. It looks great on the tablet screen, and plays very nicely portably, although battery life is more concerning with a large, graphically demanding game like this. On the big screen, Zelda is a little less visually impressive, but just as enjoyable to play. There are actually more frame rate hitches in docked mode than in portable mode, although recent patches have improved things, and this never really caused me any problems while playing. I played Breath of the Wild back-to-back with Horizon Zero Dawn, one of the best-looking games for the PlayStation 4, and I feel like Zelda compares favorably because of its strong art style. In fact, I prefer the look of Zelda in many ways because it's easier to parse. The only thing I missed graphically was resolution. It runs at 900p, a bit shy of the full 1080p the Switch is capable of. I would have also liked anti-aliasing to smooth out those jagged edges, but I was nonetheless awestruck by the visuals in this game on a regular basis. It gets by, as many Nintendo games do, on the strength of its visual design. There is a lot to say about Breath of the Wild's game design and mechanics, but those thoughts are beyond the scope of this video, and plenty of people have already analyzed this game thoroughly. Suffice it to say, Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of Nintendo's finest games. I'm not sure any one game is really worth buying a whole console for, but Breath of the Wild is certainly closer to that status than any game in recent memory. I think Snipperclips is way cooler conceptually than in reality. It's cute and innovative and does a good job of showcasing the local multiplayer that's possible with the Switch out of the box. Just hand the other Joy-Con to a second player, and you're ready to solve geometric and physics-based puzzles of various kinds. It's playable with up to 4 people, but that's probably the worst way to play the game, as communication becomes frustrating at that point. I really wanted to like this game, and in many ways I do, but it's ultimately the sort of puzzle game that pushes me away. You can see what the solution is, and how to do it long before you're able to manipulate the controls to get what you want. The shape puzzles require you to cut pieces off of your characters in order to fill an outlined shape. These puzzles are fun at first, but they require more precision than they should. It stops being fun when you're 95% of the way there, and realize you've got just a little piece missing or over the line. The physics puzzles are better, but still require too much precision. I think the game would be more fun if movement was more digital, perhaps on a grid system. It's fun figuring things out in your head, finding the solutions, but making them happen can be a real drag. Still, this is a unique game worth a look if you have a Switch. It's been an early bestseller, which indicates that many people likely disagree with my assessment here. I hope there's an eventual sequel that plays better. Fast RMX is a futuristic-styled racing game that serves as a decent technical showcase for the Switch. It looks good, and more significantly runs at a smooth 60 frames per second, even in 2-player split screen, even in portable mode. But don't play split screen in portable mode, especially not this game. As the name implies, Fast RMX is about speed, all the time. It's not very forgiving, even the first difficulty level is very challenging. I'm particularly bad at it. The tracks have a good amount of variety to them, although they seem to be designed to trick you a lot of the time. But this was yet another modestly priced game at the Switch's launch. It's very polished and content-rich, but I probably won't be playing that much of it now that our next game is out. Mario Kart 8 is the game that convinced me to get a Wii U. I have loved almost every Mario Kart game I've played since the Nintendo 64, but 8 was hands down the best, with one glaring caveat. The battle mode was terrible. No more! Mario Kart 8 Deluxe fixes this, adding proper battle arenas along with numerous battle modes. It comes with 48 excellent Grand Prix tracks for racing, and something like 40 characters, although whatever, I don't care. I'm Yoshi forever! The whole presentation runs at 1080p 60 frames per second in docked mode. This holds true in multiplayer until you get to 3 or 4 player split screen, in which case the game runs at 30 frames per second. That's a nice improvement over the Wii U version that ran at 720p. In my book, this is easily the definitive Mario Kart game, and while paying full price for a game I mostly already owned doesn't thrill me, being able to play portably is a nice feature to go along with the battle mode stuff. If you never got this on Wii U, it's an essential Switch game, no doubt. Shovel Knight is not a new game, but it's a welcome early addition to the Switch's library. As an 8-bit retro-inspired game, it's a good case study for how the system handles 2D platformers. There are a number of those coming to the system, including Nintendo's own retro games at some point. I was worried about playing these 2D games without a D-pad. The Joy-Con, of course, don't have a D-pad, so portable mode has no D-pad either. Your characters typically move in only 4 directions, so having a 4-way directional pad is more precise for these types of games. I think enthusiasts will miss the D-pad, but I found Shovel Knight to be perfectly playable without it. I think it helps that the Joy-Con thumbsticks are shorter and have less travel, and I actually preferred the thumbsticks over the separated directional buttons. I was able to play Shovel Knight just fine with all different configurations of the controls. Of course, the best way is either to play with the Joy-Con on the side of the Switch in portable mode, or with the Pro Controller, but this experience has totally eased my fears about retro gaming on the Switch. The game itself is one of the better deals at the moment. For just $25, you get 3 campaigns of one of the best retro platformers out there. It's a great game even though it isn't normally my kind of thing. The level design can get a little too frustrating for my taste. It can sometimes become more a test of my patience than my skill. I got pretty mad at a couple of points and wanted to break my Switch, but I didn't. So if anger management is something you struggle with, maybe don't play this game. Or maybe don't play in portable mode, where you risk throwing your entire system across the room. The elevator pitch from Mr. Shifty is Nightcrawler from X-Men meets Hotline Miami. It's the Hotline Miami part that really got my attention. What we've got here is a fast-paced, top-down beat-em-up, where enemies go down quickly, but so do you. The game feels really, really good to play. That's helped by dynamically destructible environments that get trashed as you pummel enemies. Using your short-range teleportation powers to evade and outsmart enemies is absolutely essential. Unfortunately, in a fast-paced game like this, frame rate drops are especially unwelcome, and the Switch version is replete with them, at least for now. It's worth noting that the game also stutters occasionally on much more powerful PCs, so this is almost certainly an optimization issue. The good news is, it looks like the game will be patched to improve performance, and once that happens, I give this game a hearty recommendation for fans of Hotline Miami and similar games. Puyo Puyo Tetris is a strange mashup of a popular Japanese puzzle game and Tetris. Now, Tetris is one of the best games ever made, and you can play it in all kinds of different ways with plenty of customization if you want it. Having Tetris on the Switch was enough to sell me on this game. You also get Puyo Puyo, which seems neat, but I haven't quite got the hang of it yet. There are a variety of modes in which you can play either Puyo Puyo or Tetris, and there are a couple of modes that act as a hybrid of both. And then there's a fully voiced story mode with a bunch of characters and stuff. Yeah, a fully voiced story mode in a puzzle game. It's a really, really odd package, but a lot of fun if you like these sorts of games. This was a different sort of test for the Switch's controls. Like Shovel Knight and 2D platformers, I strongly prefer a D-pad for Tetris, where speed and precision are absolutely essential. Unlike Shovel Knight, I found the thumbsticks to be inadequate to the task, and wound up using directional buttons while playing in portable mode. Unfortunately, if you want to play 2-player with the Joy-Con, then you're out of luck. You have no choice but to use the thumbsticks. I would be remiss if I didn't mention what I see as hidden costs to Switch ownership. The console itself retails for $300 US, but most players are likely to need or want some extras to protect their investment or enhance their experience. I know I did. So there's the microSD card to expand the storage, you'll likely want a case, and I highly recommend a screen protector. Extra USB-C cables are handy to be able to charge the console from a standard USB wall charger or a USB battery. If you want a better, nicer controller for home and multiplayer, there's the overpriced Pro Controller. If you want extra Joy-Con for 4-player games, those are highly priced add-ons as well. And if you want to use those new Joy-Con as a regular controller, you'll need another Joy-Con grip. Fortunately, Nintendo seems to be allowing developers and publishers to set game prices themselves, and we've already got a nice selection of games ranging from traditional full price to really affordable bite-sized experiences. And despite what I've said about hidden costs, it will ultimately be games that write the story of the Nintendo Switch. For all of its minor faults, frustrations, and its uncertain future, the Nintendo Switch is a really, really awesome thing. When I first saw the reveal video last October, I was wowed by the concept. Being able to go from home console to portable and back again almost instantaneously isn't just a neat trick in an advertisement. It's a reality, and that's actually kind of magical. A few years ago, while I was playing the re-release of Majora's Mask on my 3DS, I found myself wishing I could connect to a TV and play, even though the game would look like garbage blown up on the big screen. I just wanted to be able to play on a couch and with a proper controller, rather than being bound to a tiny screen with substandard cramped controls. Along comes the Nintendo Switch, and it's not only capable of this feat, but it's also such a good handheld games device that I could easily play whole games without ever docking it to the TV. Nintendo has always made quality games. It has not always made quality hardware to match. This time, things seem to have aligned. The right compromises have been struck for the most part, and if Nintendo throws its game development weight behind bolstering the Switch's library, this could be one of the greatest consoles ever made. And while 2 months of ownership is too little time to really get a sense of the console's longevity, this isn't a snap judgment either. The next year will be very telling for the Switch. Will its strong initial sales continue? Will Nintendo's big games beyond Super Mario Odyssey resonate with fans and new customers? Will Nintendo pursue opportunities to make the Switch a multimedia device with streaming apps? And will Nintendo's online service finally bring parity with the other big gaming platforms? As a general games enthusiast and a fan of Nintendo's games, I hope the Switch is a big success. It deserves to be if Nintendo supports it well with system updates and great games. What I've seen so far is a solid foundation for that. I hate to consider what would happen if the Switch doesn't succeed. The video game industry is a whole lot more interesting with Nintendo in the console business.